Welcome to Exploring Possibilities. I'm your host, Cheryl Sitz, and I've created this show to demystify holistic wellness, one conversation at a time. You'll get to know the person behind the practice, what inspired them to express their gifts and talents the way they do, and then we'll dive into their practice for a deeper understanding. There are so many ways that we can heal ourselves and our planet. Why not play in possibility? See what resonates for you. You'll find over 3 years of archived shows at journeyofpossibilities.com. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, and you'll never miss a show. If you do subscribe, I'd like to ask you to rate us so that others will find our show as well. Thank you so much for that. We'll introduce today's guest right after these messages from our sponsors. As I've met and worked with all these holistic practitioners, my life has literally transformed. So much so that I studied to learn how to be a holistic practitioner and transformational life coach so that I can pass along some of this transformation to you, because life is short. We deserve to live it. Life is a journey of possibilities. Are you ready? What do you say? One session? Why not? Reach out to me at CherylSitz.com and let's play in possibility. Our new digital magazine is packed with inspirational stories and valuable tips to live a more holistic, spiritual life. Check out the premiere issue at journeyofpossibilities.com. If you like what you see, subscribe for free and get a new issue every 3 months delivered straight to your inbox. That's right, it's free at journeyofpossibilities.com. Practitioners, contact us for affordable advertising too. That's journeyofpossibilities.com.
Have you ever gone to a social media seminar and you have the online experts telling you, get a blog, get a website, get on social media, all this other stuff? By the time you're done with that seminar, that online expert is very good at frying your brain. And the funny part is, you come back home, you get in front of the computer, and you're lost. Hi, I am Mario with Tech Life Balance. I see this all the time. You spend so much money and still don't know what is going on with your online presence. And you probably don't need all of that. Let me go ahead and translate Geek to English for you and show you what you really need, because you don't need it all. You probably only need a few components. You have a great message out there, and I would like to hear it, and I definitely want to help you put it out there. I am Mario Rosales with TechLifeBalance.net. I produce this podcast because I love distributing messages. Let me help you distribute your message.
Today's guest is Dr. Aaron Judkins, also known as the Maverick Archaeologist. Now, he's explored 16 of the top 40 archaeological sites in the world, several of them sacred sites, and was one of the first participants at the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem in 2004. He's excavated 15 different dinosaurs, which I'm fascinated by, directing 2 of the digs in Montana and Colorado, and he's excavated the longest contiguous dinosaur track in the Western Hemisphere. He's written 4 books, most recently Alien Agenda, The Return of the Nephilim, co-authored by Dr. Michael McDaniel. Dr. Judkins is also, in his spare time, a flight medic, EMS, chaplain, certified scuba diver. He's even thrown Santa off the back of a fire truck. So we've got lots to talk about today, and I'm excited he's joining us. Welcome, Dr. Judkins.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Yes, I have accidentally thrown Santa Claus off the fire truck.
Not what you wanted to be your claim to fame, was it?
No, but there is a story to that.
I'm sure there is. It's hard to know where to start with you. You've got such an exciting life going on. We're having this conversation from right here in Texas, correct?
Yeah, I'm based in central North Texas area, just in outside of Dallas, and I've been in Texas for since 1986, I think, actually, more specifically. And so this has been, a great home state for me. And of course, lots of Southwest archaeology in Texas, Native American sites, and I just love it all. So I rarely have an idle moment in my life. I'm always on the go.
That's exciting. And so did it come from you being in Texas that you found your passion for archaeology, or how did you find your way into this path to begin with?
Well, I've always had this passion for history and archaeology. I pursued that up to a point, but then it was more towards my medical field when I got out of high school that I really went towards the, this side of my life. And in the background, I've always had this passion for archaeology, and I'd always just schedule my vacations and things around and go do something archaeological related, or go learn some history somewhere. And so I would go to these sites and check them out. For me, back in 1996 was when it really hit me that there was more to all this than I had realized. There was a NBC special hosted by Charlton Heston, and it was called The Mysterious Origins of Man. And this special that aired on TV blew me away. I almost fell out of my chair because, see, in the town that I live in, there was a county, not a county museum, but there was a museum across the county that I had visited just weeks before, and it had some of these artifacts they were showing on this special, The Mysterious Origins of Man. And I recognized them, and I thought, hey, I've seen these artifacts. And I was surprised to learn, here they are on this special, talking about out-of-place artifacts. And so I watched the whole series. It was so there was a lot of response that NBC got from that episode. They ran it a couple more times on the air. I think they ran it a total of 3 times. It was got a huge response, but that really kind of broke open the door for me, because I realized there were things in archaeology that was not being discussed. There was no suitable explanation that academia had for these artifacts because they were considered out of place. And a lot of the times, these artifacts would just be ignored altogether. They would be locked away, never seen by the public, or they would be discredited. So there's a lot of things that were happening that when I realized that when I got out in the field and started looking at the evidence myself, what I had been taught necessarily growing up wasn't matching the archaeological record. And there was a disparity between the two. I had been taught one version of history and archaeology, but there was another thing called empirical evidence that was out in the field of archaeology that just wasn't matching up, and these out-of-place artifacts was part of that. So for me, I decided that I was going to pursue try to pursue the truth about these, what these were, the stories behind them. It really intrigued me. So that's part of how I really got into searching this area of archaeology.
Well, that's a great response. And I know many times these days when people talk about the truth beneath, the hidden truth, the unseen truth, they're talking about either a spiritual component, a galactic component, especially when it comes to finding old artifacts. Which direction were you going in with that? What do you mean exactly when you say out of place?
Well, I didn't know exactly. It was not considered in the conventional timeline of geology. So there would be man-made artifacts that was in supposed millions of years of ancient rock that could not be explained. Why was it in the rock layer? So there's a number of man-made artifacts that are strewn throughout the geological column that should not be there. Well, that's interesting. There's trees that are growing upside down in the fossil record. Well, we all know trees don't grow upside down in the fossil record. Well, why is that? How are they going through multiple layers of ancient rock and upside down on top of that? So there's some strange things going on. We have an iron pot found in a coal layer that's 600 million years old. This little iron pot has 2 pore spouts on each end. It's clearly man-made. It's an artifact that someone used at one time, but why is it in a coal layer 600 million years old? Why is there a number of these artifacts, like a fossilized human finger that has been found in Cretaceous limestone that dates back to the time of the dinosaurs of the Cretaceous, some 110 million years old? Why is there an iron hammer encased in Cretaceous limestone rock, again dating to the time of the dinosaurs? This little hammer has been found near London, Texas, I think back in the 1940s. And something very interesting about the hammer, that even the NASA labs are saying that this form of metal cannot be produced today. It has never rusted. They put a little file mark on it. It's never rusted. we all know that according to the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, that things does not get better, they wind down. There's a law of entropy that everything ages or breaks, things are winding down. Your car, eventually quits working. The clock doesn't wind up, it winds down. Metal rust, that's part of that equation. And so there's a number of these artifacts that I just didn't understand why these artifacts are not out in the mainstream. Why are we not being told the things that are being hidden? And so this was a new thing for me. I wanted to explore the stories behind these artifacts. Some of them are highly controversial, but for me, that really led me on this journey of truth, of, what were these artifacts and why did it contradict the story that, we had been taught growing up about life origins. And so that led into a number of different things for me, but I didn't care. I just wanted to know what they were, and whatever the truth about them was fine. But that has led to many open doors to do other projects, which I've been involved in.
Yeah, and it's funny how the more answers you get, the more questions come along with those answers, right? It's
yes.
a never-ending quest. Well, you have been involved in some really spiritual work. You want to tell me a little bit about some of the projects like Finding Noah?
Yeah, sure. Finding Noah was a documentary by a film crew that chronicles our expedition up Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey in the search for Noah's Ark. This was a film that was produced and directed by Brent Baum, who has directed a number of movies in Hollywood. This is his first documentary, and he wanted to tell our story about the search for Noah's Ark. So the film's about a group of intrepid explorers who step outside their normal roles of life and for 2 months search on this mountain that's 17,000 feet in elevation, that has a number of difficulties surrounding the area. It's geopolitically unstable. There's fighting between the Turkish military and the PKK. There's atmospheric conditions around the mountain that's hugely unstable. Lightning strikes and boulders, and there's crevasses and permanent ice glaciers on the summit of this mountain, and it's about some 400 square miles. So it's hugely difficult to search this mountain. One, you got to get permission to get on the mountain first, and it's just hugely difficult to get on a mountain like this to do any kind of search, because once you get up there, you can't just look. It's all under the ice, and so there was a lot of scientific equipment that had to be hauled up to the summit. We had a number of multidisciplined scientists that was on our expedition, and it was probably one of the last greatest scientific expeditions ever done in the search for the Ark. We've had a number of credible historical witnesses and modern witnesses that have seen a superstructure on that mountain. So a lot of the data was pointing us to this mountain in eastern Turkey. So Finding Noah came out to theaters last fall. It was the largest theatrical documentary ever released in theaters, and then it went to DVD. So Finding Noah is available now on DVD through your normal, distribution outlets like Amazon and, the others. And it's available now for you to watch. So that was part of my journey in Finding Noah. I was the archaeologist in front of the camera, and I was the associate producer behind the camera. So I had a dual role in that film, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it was one of the greatest highlights of my life to be involved in that project.
I'm sure it must have been. And that begs the question, because we do have a lot of people right now that are going through changing careers, finding their passions, expanding and living bigger expressions of themselves. How did you get some of these doors opening for you to do some of the incredible projects that you've been involved in?
Well, that's interesting. I have developed relationships with people over 20 years, and one of my first archaeological projects was actually in paleontology. It was sometimes paleontology and archaeology cross over in their fields, and I was invited to go on a dinosaur dig in the late 90s. And so I went, and a group from NASA was going to be there live streaming the event and participating in the excavations. And so I was invited on that dig, and then subsequently I was invited the year after, and went back for many years, and still do. We still go to this particular site and excavate dinosaurs. But in 2004, I was invited to go to a dig in Israel where they found the Pool of Siloam. And so these doors, get opened up in ways that, because you have developed relationships with people, and they just simply, pick up the phone and call and see if you're available to go. So this is true with the expedition over in Turkey. I had been invited a number of years before to go, but time constraints and financial constraints, I could not go, and I was very disappointed because I would have if I could have. But I was speaking at an event in Houston in it was January or February of 2013, and one of my colleagues was also there speaking, and he was involved in the search for the Ark. And so we got to talking about that, and he said, "What are you doing this August?" I said, "I have no idea what I'm doing." He said, "Well, how would you like to be over in Eastern Turkey searching for the Ark?" And I said, "Well, that's great. I wanted to go before I couldn't." He said, "Well, this is the last major push for the Ark, and we need you if you can be there." So I told him yes, not knowing how in the world I'm going to get to financially make this happen. And so turns out that the film crew from Finding Noah caught wind of what we wanted to do, and they created this whole documentary, and we allowed the cameras to come in and follow us up the mountain. So they really tell the story about what we did, and then of course the name of that film is Finding Noah.
I think it's neat that you said yes, and then a way was made for you, because I think that's so key for us to really realize some of the bigger dreams that we have is when that door does open, we have to say yes and then figure it out as we go along, right?
Right. You're right, and that's what I'm doing again. I have very select opportunities to be involved in historic archaeological projects, such as the search for the Ark. Everyone was going, despite the knowing that the film crew was on board. As a matter of fact, none of us knew about the film until about 3 months later, when they asked if they could come on board, and then we were able to have an agreement where they were able to come and film. But none of us were on the project for that reason. We had no idea that was going to happen, but it turns out that's the way it happened. So, and in other cases, I find myself 5 months later, in Peru, in Bolivia for a month doing a project there. And I just would have never imagined that I would have been in Peru working on a project with L.A. Marzulli on these elongated skulls of the Paracas culture. And so it's pretty fascinating, because people ask me, well, what's your next project? And most of the time I don't even know until it just all of a sudden it happens. In this case, I have another project that I do know that I'm working on currently for Israel.
Yes, and we are going to be talking about that too. I've got so many questions for you. I'm just, okay, each one seems to lead to another one. Must be like your career. So where does Maverick come from? Is that a name somebody gave you, or is that something that you picked up for yourself? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, Maverick was a description. I was doing a radio show one time. I used to have my own radio show for 3 years on Inception Radio Network on a program called Epic Voyages Radio. And before I ever was a guest host on that program, I was a guest about one of my first books that came out, which you mentioned earlier, called Alien Agenda: The Return of the Nephilim. And a caller called in and asked how I became a Maverick archaeologist. And that description really stuck with me later on. as people began to refer to me as a Maverick archaeologist, because I was outside the box, and people liked that. It resonated with them because I wasn't bought and paid for necessarily. I didn't have strings attached with people who had an agenda. This was just something that I was going out and doing anyway by myself. And I would go to these sites and, film. And so that nickname actually became a nickname later on, but that's what people identify me as a Maverick archaeologist, because I go where other archaeologists refuse to go, or won't go, or can't go, or just don't even care about going. And one of those is the search for Noah's Ark. Well, why would you want to go do that? Well, what if something's there? Yeah. Well, they automatically relegate it to myth or legend. Well, what if we get there and something is found? What if a superstructure is found on Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey? Then what? What does that mean? So there's many questions that have to be answered. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And we have to understand that sometimes it takes someone to say, yes, I will go. Yes, I will search this thing out. It's one thing to research on the internet. And I've had a lot of people tell me Noah's Ark's already been found, and here it is from the 1970s, and they do all this internet research, and that's great. But there's a point in time where you have to get out of the library and get into the field, just like Indiana Jones puts it in one of the movies. Get out of the library and get into the field. And I love getting my hands dirty, but there's only so much you can do, and you can't vet the information sometimes on the internet. And so when I go to these places directly on locale, then I can speak with authority on it. And so I can talk about it intelligently. And so when people ask me now, well, what about that Noah's Ark over on the Darupanar site, some 15, 20 miles away from Mount Ararat? This is a place where Ron Wyatt says he found the Ark. And I simply tell them, I've been there. I've been to that site. That's not Noah's Ark. It's a natural geological formation. If it was, I would have never climbed Mount Ararat. But we did our homework. We went there. We investigated this. This site has been confirmed by archaeologists and geologists alike. It's a natural geological formation. And so I'm able to give answers because I've been to these sites directly to look at them and investigate them. And so the Maverick archaeologist is really born out of the forbidden archaeology, the out-of-place artifacts, the stories that no archaeologist wants to go investigate because they just don't care about it. And this is the archaeology that I've taken up the mantle and said, I will go. And so that's what I do.
And what grand adventures you get to write about and do movies with, too. So, and we're glad for the information that we can then find on the internet and maybe go and get our own answers. I wanted to ask you, because I've been through your website and I see that you're a very spiritual person. And while maybe in some cases, like finding Noah, where you find the ark and you get more information about something from the Bible, it seems to more affirm the biblical teachings. Are there other instances where you find that your career pathway questions some of the things that you accept in your faith, or how has that gone for you?
Sure. Let's take the UFO phenomenon, for instance. That's one of the reasons I wrote Alien Agenda, The Return of the Nephilim. I was on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie when that book came out, and we sent him an advance copy, and he was very complimentary. One thing about George, he's very gracious host. I've met him in person now, actually, and he's gracious in person as well, but he complimented our book. He said, man, what a great looking book. It's got the pyramids with the UFO coming over it with some camel guys, in the front, foreground. And my graphic artist who did that did a phenomenal job. But we wanted to present an idea that, yes, the UFO phenomenon we believe is true, but at the same time, very, very few people are talking about the phenomenon through a biblical perspective. And not many people have heard of that. Now, Eric von Däniken does this all the time. He uses Old Testament scripture in ancient writings to look at the UFO phenomenon. He made that famous when he wrote his book, Chariots of the Gods. And he went from being a hotel clerk or manager or something in the hotel business that he was doing to selling over 60 million copies of that book. And it basically launched him. But there's questions about the theory where you go back and look at ancient astronaut theory and things like this. So for me, it really hit home because there was a sighting near where I lived called the Stephenville Lights sighting back in 2008. You may be aware of that. It started, this sighting was a lights that was spotted near the nuclear plant in Glen Rose, Texas, that then headed towards Stephenville at a very fast rate of speed, that was actually pursued by F-16s out of Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas. And this is all documented very, very well by others. I write about it in the book, but that spurred me to ask the question because, see, at 17, I saw something that I could not explain. Me and 3 of my high school friends were out on a summer night, and we saw an object in the sky that we could not explain. I write about it in the book, but I never got an answer for that, never got an answer for what that thing was. And so I just went on with the rest of my life. Well, in 2008, here's this thing that's very close to home, and it's seen by multiple people in the community of Stephenville, Texas. This is a ranch farm community. They were the #1 milk production with cattle in that area. They have no interest in UFOs. We're talking about the postmaster and the sheriff's department, credible eyewitnesses to this thing that actually went on Larry King Live to speak about this. And so the witnesses were credible. I believe the story, and I happened to be through that area about 30 minutes prior. I never saw anything, but a couple of hours later, I began to hear reports about somebody that people had been seeing this event out there. And I guess it was after the sun went down that this all happened, but it was late sunset. I was right through that area. But, there was always a question mark about what that thing was I saw when I was 17. Now, what is this that everyone's seen? They had the FAA reports released from the tracking data from the airport. And it was these reports that were eventually released through I guess it was through the Freedom of Information Act, but these actual radar reports were released, and it shows the object and the F-16 in pursuit, and they can never catch it. So, matter of fact, for 10 days, the Air Force denied they had aircraft in that area. For 10 days, they denied. And then after 10 days, they said, okay, we finally had aircraft out there, but it was a training exercise. So to answer the question, yes, I've had some of my sacred cows slaughtered because the UFO phenomenon, I believe, is true. But I have a different perspective about what the UFO phenomenon is, why it's here, why it's been here for a very long time, and where all this is headed. And for me, that simply is those questions I had just to try to answer myself. And then as I studied, this thing more intently, I teamed up with Dr. McDaniel, and we co-wrote the book together. He writes on the theology and on the eschatology side of things. I write on the historical side of things and interview Steve Allen, who's one of the eyewitness accounts at the Stephenville UFO sighting. So for me, I had sacred cow slaughtered about this because there is a real phenomenon, and there is a real spiritual side to life, not into physicality that we can see, hear, touch, feel, and know there is something beyond that. And so we try to give an answer for that in the book, but there are things like the elongated skulls in Peru. And what are these things about? Why are they so elongated? Why do they look so abnormal? These are questions that I've been asked to study as an archaeologist and to try to put, an answer to these questions. So I love trying to figure out these mysteries of the past because sometimes they lead you, in a way that you have to reconsider sometime your own presuppositions about things. And I've certainly had to readjust in my own personal life.
Definitely. The questions of the past become the questions that lead us to discover more about ourselves, which is always fun. And I'm glad that you pinned right into Peru, because that's where I was going next. We're actually about to do a trip down to Machu Picchu this fall around the time that this comes out, and our digital magazine with the cover story about you. So tell us a little bit about what all you found in terms of Machu Picchu from more of a, I watched your video on your website, and I encourage everybody to do so, just more of a, again, some have said ancient civilizations came and constructed that, and it's been there longer than science can explain. Where do you come from after having been down there and seen some of what you've seen?
Machu Picchu is one of those places on the earth that is very special. I highly recommend anyone going to put it on your bucket list. I'm so excited that you're going over there to see this. I really want to go back. Machu Picchu is really a place that's been locked in time. It was discovered, I think it was in 1911, by Hiram Bingham. And this was a place that was lost to, I guess, about 500 years of time. The conquistadors, when they came in to Peru, they ended up executing the last Inca ruler on the square at Cusco. And it decimated the Inca culture from that time forward. They found Ollantaytambo, which was up in the Andes, near the Incan Trail on the way to Machu Picchu. However, they never found Machu Picchu. And I think if they had, we wouldn't have Machu Picchu the way we have it today. The fact that it was lost to time, the conquistadors never found it, the Incas retreated to Machu Picchu, and this is an area that has been virtually untouched. So the Inca architecture, the megalithic structures, the archaeology of Machu Picchu was there when it was found in rediscovered in 1911. It had been overgrown by the jungle and virtually protected for all those years. So this is really, I think, one of the most amazing places on earth. It almost feels like you're stepping back into that time period, because you can see and hear and all the things that they would have experienced away from traffic and cars and things. The only way to get in there is to take a train into Agua Calientes, and then you can go on up and stay at Agua Calientes, which is a beautiful little area. It's so quaint and hidden in the way there. You're on the edge of the Amazon jungle, and I was so amazed at this place that I really wanted to go back and spend some more time there, because when I got there, I had 2 days there, and I wanted to really just explore more. But the film crew from Finding Noah came and met me there, and we did 2 days of interviews at Machu Picchu, and really kind of ate up my time there. But if you go, I would highly encourage you to go and climb Huayna Picchu, which is the peak behind Machu Picchu. It's about 1,000 feet higher. You have to have a ticket to climb that. It's about an hour hike. It's kind of steep, but I would encourage you to go do that, climb Huayna Picchu. It is just it's an amazing place, and I think it just proves that it's one of the new 7 wonders of the ancient world. And if you ever have a chance to go, I highly recommend going there. And I'm so glad that you're gonna be able to go. It's gonna really change your perspective about that, about the Inca culture.
There's just a lot of magic in Peru anyway for me. It's going to be my 3rd trip down there, and each time I fall in love with it at a deeper level. There's just a lot going on down there. Well, there's a lot going on in your life as well. You've had, I would imagine, some dreams come true, it sounds like. I know you've got a big trip coming up that I want to touch on, and beyond that, do you have a big dream that isn't yet on your radar but you hope to create in your future?
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. So I do have another project coming up. It's the Dead Sea Cave Archaeological Project that will be projected for this December in Israel. This is an area in Qumran where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls back in 1946. they found 11 caves over the next 10 years from 1946 to 1956. And this was on the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, about 13 miles east of Jerusalem. And they have found hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts, what we now know as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so scholars have identified the remains of some 870 separate scrolls, some biblical scrolls, some non-biblical scrolls. As a matter of fact, the book of Enoch was found in there, the book of Jasher and the book of Jubilees, and every book of the Old Testament, with the exception of the book of Esther, was found. So there is just a huge area in this area called Qumran that's been excavated by Dr. Randall Price. And this area has many more caves in the region that's never been excavated. And so we have permission from the Israeli Antiquity Authority to go in and excavate one of these caves. And in one of the caves was a scroll called the Temple Scroll. It was found in Cave 11. It's one of the longest scrolls ever found. In the Temple Scroll, it gives a description about another cave where they hid some other manuscripts, and it was called the Cave of Columns. And the Israeli Antiquity Authority has done a cursory look at this cave, although it's never been excavated, but they've gone in and documented where the cave's at the mouth of the entrance. It's all filled in, but towards the entrance in the front there are columns. And could it be that this is the very Cave of Columns that's referred to in the Temple Scroll? So we don't know what's in this cave, but if this is indeed the Cave of Columns, there should be more manuscripts or Dead Sea Scrolls back in this cave, or artifacts. So we just don't know yet. But this is part of the expedition I'm going to be on with lead archaeologist Dr. Randall Price and Bruce Hall from also Finding Noah. And just coincidentally that we've all teamed up on this sideline project. And this is going to be a historic archaeological project, because once this cave is excavated, that's it. We have a very narrow window of opportunity to go do this work. And so there's not going to be any season 2 at this particular cave. So we have to get over there and get the work done. They've had a huge problem with thieves going into some of these caves and excavating. I say excavating loosely. They're looting these caves for artifacts to sell on the black market. And so we have got to get over there to excavate and document everything fully, and so we can prevent any more looting in these caves. And, you know, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the greatest archaeological find in history. So only another, find like such as Noah's Ark could probably trump that, but this has really given us some great insight into the community of the Essenes who lived in the Qumran area before Titus came in and sacked Jerusalem with the Roman army in 70 A.D. It has given us so much information about who these people were that lived in the Qumran area, and were probably the authors, at least in most part, of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we have a lot of work to do ahead of us in this area. I have a GoFundMe account set up to help make it happen for my expenses over there. If you go to GoFundMe.com and just simply type in Dead Sea Cave 2016, it should pull up. It's also on my website, too. You can go there. It's aaronjudkins.com. And then the second part of your question was, what's my dream that I've always wanted to do and accomplish that I haven't done yet? You're right. I've had some big ones happen, and, I'm very blessed to have been a part of those things. I would say probably that the one that I'm really hopeful for, one of my dreams that I think if I ever got a chance to do it would be to have my own TV show on a network that would be talking about these artifacts and these places where we could go out, the man versus archaeology concept, where we can go out and look at these and talk about them and show people the evidence and these out-of-place artifacts. So for me, I think that would be probably very unique, because not a lot of people are doing that. There's shows in archaeology that's been very successful. Josh Gates has a show out called Expedition Unknown, and you have the other show, America Unearthed, with Scott Walter, that's been very successful. So I think we could do something along the archaeological history lines, but something very different with Man versus Archaeology. So we just need help with people showing their interest on Facebook, on the Man versus Archaeology page, or going to my website, aaronjudkins.com, and just typing in what you would like to see, because occasionally producers come and knock on my door, and I just talked with one today, as a matter of fact, and they like to hear feedback from the listeners and the public and what you want to see. So if you're interested in a concept show like that, let me know, because I forward all that to them.
What a great dream. I would love to see that happen for you as well, so I could watch it. That's a great idea. Well, I can't. So we are going to talk a lot more about the Dead Sea Scrolls in a separate interview that we're going to publish in our digital magazine October 1st. So look for that with pictures and more on the GoFundMe site, and I'll put a link to that on this podcast. But I can't conclude our podcast interview here without asking you how you managed to throw Santa off a fire truck.
Oh, well, one of my other careers has been in the medical field. And part of that is being a reserve firefighter paramedic for my community. And I do that free of charge. It's not something I get paid for. I'm at the station for 24 hours, and whether a fire goes out or a wreck or an ambulance call or whatever, I'm there to respond to that on a 911 system. One year we were, every Christmas we have a Christmas parade in town, and in the 4th of July parades, things like this that the fire department participates in. I happened to be driving the engine truck in the parade that was carrying Santa Claus on the top. And we had gone through the parade in town, and just a quaint little town, lots of people come out, and the kids, and so as we proceeded through the parade and we went a couple of blocks down, I turned the corner so I could drop Santa off. Santa decided not to wait for the fire engine to stop. And he thought he could just roll off the back and jump off and land on his 2 feet like he had planned, I assume. And I look in my rearview mirror and I see Santa rolling down the street. And so I immediately stopped the fire truck, and we jump out to see if Santa's okay, and he was, thankfully. But I asked him, I said, Santa, how come you didn't wait for me to stop? And he said, well, I guess I should have. So he I think he learned his lesson, but he was unhurt. Just, I think his pride was a little hurt, but Santa got up and kept going. So that's the story of the throwing the Santa off the fire truck.
That's funny. Well, I do like to ask all of my guests at the end of the interview if they have a parting thought that they'd like to leave listeners with today. So what might you have for a parting thought for our listeners?
Oh, well, that's a great, that's a great question. One of my mottos, I've really just adapted it for me, but every man dies, not every man really lives. And I think if you adjusted that to say every person dies, but not every person really lives. And I learned a long time ago, I'm not going to look back on my life and live with regrets. I'm not going to look back and say, I wish I would have gone to Israel. I wish I would have gone to search for Noah's Ark. I should have, and I didn't, because I didn't say yes. I didn't say I will go. And I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to live life to the fullest. And that means taking risk. That means getting out of your comfort zone. That means doing things you would not normally do. And then maybe you have to work at it a little bit. Maybe you have to sweat. Maybe you have to get out and do something. Even if it's volunteering. I've volunteered 50% of my time over the past 10 years in the summers. And people who know me know that's true. And I still volunteer my time with the fire department. I volunteer with the local museum. I don't get paid for any of that. I volunteered a lot of my time because I believe in those things. I would volunteer in archaeology, and I did for many years. I never got anything. I had to pay for it. I had to go and drive there. I had to pay my own way. But I did it because I loved to do it. I had a passion for it. Find your passion. Find what you love to do. and you'll never work a day in your life. But volunteer, get behind something that you believe in. Don't do it for money. Do it because you care. And I think that's my message is look back one day and say, I've had no regrets. I've lived life to the fullest. I'm coming in, sliding into home plate. I'm scratched up. I'm bruised up. But that's the only way to do it. And so every man dies, not every man really lives. So I would say get out there and live.
You're a great mentor for that. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to be a guest on Exploring Possibilities? Drop me a note at info@journeyofpossibilities.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Exploring Possibilities.